Once you've set proper levels for your principal audio, you'll likely need to make intra-clip adjustments elsewhere in the sequence. For example, we have our music here, and there are some places where people aren't talking where I want to bring the music a little bit louder. Also, there are some places within the interviews where our interview subjects talk more loudly, and we'll need to bring those volume levels down as well. So we're going to do this with keyframes. Now, I'm going to zoom in at the very beginning here, and plus plus. And here's a place where we'll probably add some keyframes. And first, I just want to cover the logistics of keyframes, then we'll go through the sequence and add them. All right, so if you just have your general selection tool enabled, you can command click or control click on the thin line here. And if you can't see the line, then you'll need to increase the size of your audio track. So you can see that it's not available here, but if I hover over my track selector and scroll up with my mouse scroll wheel, there it is. And so command click and command click will allow me to add those keyframes. Notice that when I hover over my keyframe, I get a pop-up telling me what my volume level is at. So here I'm at negative 21.82 decibels. And then to adjust the keyframes, you can click on a keyframe and drag up or down. And notice that the pop-up tells you where you're at as far as your decibel level. You can also drag on the line itself. And as long as keyframe is selected, you can use the keyboard shortcut. So your left and right bracket keys will work here. Left bracket will go down 1 decibel at a time, and right bracket will go up 1 decibel at a time. If you add shift to that, it'll go 3 decibels at a time. So shift right bracket will go up 3 decibels at a time, and shift left bracket will go down 3 decibels at a time. You can also drag keyframes to the left and the right to affect the ramp. So if I was to drag this to the left, this change would occur more gradually, whereas if I had a steeper ramp, it would occur more quickly. So I'm going to play this, and I want to take a look at my audio meters. We've already made sure that our principal audio is peaking properly, and so now our job is to just make sure that the music is mixed appropriately. So basically, it's more subjective. It's whatever sounds good. So I'll go ahead and play this.
Greyhound racing is controversial.
All right, so I thought that was a little quick, so I'll go ahead and drag this a little bit more to the left, like so, and I'm going to lower the level a little bit as well. And I'll play it again.
Greyhound racing is controversial because...
All right, so I'm okay with that. Let's head down to this area right here and add some more keyframes. Now, there's another way that you can add keyframes that involves switching your tool. So instead of having the selection tool enabled, I switch to the pen tool, keyboard shortcut P. And then I don't have to hold down anything when I click on the line. So I'm going to switch to the pen tool P. And then I'm just going to click, click, and click, click. And now we can make our adjustment. I'm going to switch back to selection tool V, and then I'm just going to drag this up just a little bit. Okay, and play.
There once was a time.
All right, I'm fine with that. And let's move downstream to our next gap right here. Okay. And this time I'm going to actually create keyframes using the Effect Controls panel. You just need to make sure that you've selected your music, and then you come up to the Effect Controls panel, and I'm going to twirl down Level under Volume, okay? And you can see here that we already have keyframes at the beginning of our sequence. I can zoom into this by pressing plus a couple of times, all right? So here are our keyframes at the beginning, and let's just come down to this area right here and add several more. I'll come to the beginning of this gap, and you can see that the playhead here moves in tandem when I move this one down in the timeline. And now I'll create keyframes here in the Effect Controls panel. I can click on this button here, and you can see that I'm at negative 21.8 decibels at this point. We can hover on this, and we also get that negative 21.82 decibels. And then I can come downstream a little bit and add another keyframe. And we'll come down here and add one more, and then finally another one right here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that I can see this a little bit better. So we have 2 pairs of keyframes, and if I wanted to adjust these middle 2, I would just select them, and let me give myself a little bit more room here. Select them, and I'll just click and then shift click, and then I can grab this keyframe and drag it up. And watch in the timeline when I do this, and you can see in the timeline that it responded accordingly. Now, adjusting keyframes in the Effect Controls panel is a little bit awkward, but it does have its uses. You have the ability to jump from keyframe to keyframe here in the window, and this can be useful when you need to dial in a very specific value. All right, so if I wanted to come to this keyframe here and say that I wanted it to be -7, and then I wanted to come to this one here and also have that at -7, it's very easy to do that within the Effect Controls panel. If you're being organic about it, it's easier to do in the timeline. It's also easier to delete keyframes in the Effect Controls panel sometimes. I just lasso all of these keyframes and then press delete on the keyboard, and they go away. Otherwise, you have to kind of do it one by one down here in the timeline. You just click and then shift-click on the ones that you want to delete, and then you can delete those. I'll undo that, though, and let's take a listen to see what we think.
People think
it's a little intense, so let's bring that down. I'll go ahead and just park right here in the middle, and I'll highlight these two keyframes like so, and I'll use my left bracket key and bring that down just a little bit. And you can see that now we're at -9 decibels, and this should be better.
people think they're just.
Now, one other thing you might like to do is change the keyframe interpolation. Let me zoom in just a little bit more. And if I right-click on this keyframe, it's at linear. But say I wanted to change that to Bezier. That gives me those little direction handles, so I can manipulate those however I like. Let me undo that. I can also perhaps change it to hold, which is going to make an abrupt change from keyframe to keyframe. But linear is just fine for me here. And let's just continue on a couple more changes. And rather than do these next few gaps, I'm going to come to these markers that I've made because I want to show you how to do keyframes on the actual dialogue. Let's take a listen here and look at the audio meters as I play this.
Pets. So at that point, rescue groups started popping up.
So she speaks a little bit loudly at the beginning there, and you can see that. So let's just keyframe that. I'm going to increase the size of my A1 track so I can see my line. And I'm going to Command-click here and here, and we'll just bring that down a little bit. And I'll play.
So at that point, rescue groups started popping.
All right, I think we solved that. And I have one more down here where we're peaking. And I'll zoom in, and let's take a listen. This looks like it's really spiking here.
I would pick up the leash, and he would look at me.
And we've actually gone above 0, as indicated by this red warning here. So again, I'll Command-click here and here, bring this down, and see where we're at.
I would pick up the leash.
A little bit more, so I'll left bracket that down a few more decibels.
I would pick up the leash.
All right, great. So I can keep going here, but hopefully you can see that audio keyframing is really essential to creating the proper balance between various elements in your sequence.